Calls to end corruption are growing in intensity. I mean, just yesterday, the Chief Justice Mkhuleko Hlengwa said South Africa must reposition itself to get rid of corruption. Earlier this week, the new chairman of Parliament's key SCOPA Oversight Committee, Mkhuleko Hlengwa, also made a plea at the start of the annual Southern African Internal Audit Conference in Sandton here in Johannesburg. The role of auditors has continued to be under the spotlight, particularly as far as corporate corruption is concerned. Now, the acting CEO of the Institute of Internal Auditors of South Africa is Charles Nel, and he's with us in the studio this morning. Mr. Nel, thank you very much for coming in, especially because you told me just before we went on air that this is the last day of that conference. You should be heading there, you should be there, but thanks for giving us your time this morning.
It's a pleasure, Dan, and thank you for inviting us to speak to your viewers.
Now, internal auditing and there's external auditing, but it's all an auditing function at the end of the day.
That's correct. The one is more the attestation of the financial statements. That's external audit, to say that the financial statements are correct and the information presented therein is correct. The internal auditors work for the organization, and their role is to try and look at the processes within the organization, look at the design of the control mechanisms, and the efficiency and the effectiveness with which those control mechanisms are executed by management and by the staff.
Now, if internal auditors work for the organization, how easy or difficult is it for them to blow the whistle?
It is very difficult sometimes to blow the whistle because you have to have a huge amount of moral courage and be able to stand up against incredibly powerful people at times and tell them what they're not doing is correct.
I've seen reports that sometimes internal auditors have to deal with intimidation, for example. Does your institute assist them in any way or give them guidance on how to behave in a situation where you see something is being done, it's wrong, there are no correct control mechanisms or measures in place, and you are flagging it, but meanwhile somebody tells you, shut up?
It does happen. And I think the issue is one of the reasons why the Anti-Intimidation Ethical Practices Forum was created is to give all professionals in the audit space, in the governance space, the risk managers, for instance, would be able to go to that forum and get on advice on how to deal with these issues, intimidation issues and corruption issues. It's, however, up to the individual to be able to stand up and say that. So you essentially, as an internal auditor, have two choices. If you do not want to remain at the company, you would have to leave. But I believe it's the moral courage that has to be applied by the internal auditors.
Moral courage, that also speaks to ethics in a way. Internal auditors, you are the institute that represents them, and you are now at this conference since Monday that ends today, networking and talking and sharing notes and experiences. 100% ethical? Are you guys 100% ethical?
I think most internal auditors try to be. But we do have a number of cases that we are dealing with at the moment. But the Institute does give us mechanisms to report members. So they can be reported and we can take action. We have an investigations committee and
you take action, you investigate. What kind of consequences would fall on an internal auditor who has broken the rules, so to speak?
Well, they could be prevented from practicing. Obviously, in South Africa at the moment, we've got no regulation around the profession of internal audit, not like the external auditors. And one of the reasons is that we have to deal with as an institute is that not all the people who practice internal auditors are members. So we have a problem in that space. And we also have internal auditors who are sanctioned, but we aren't able to stop them from practicing in other places at the moment once they've been sanctioned.
Now, despite the threats of intimidation, I mean, South Africans overall would expect internal auditors particularly to call out corruption, especially where we've been currently with your big firms, the stories that we've heard about the big companies, what happened with the KPMGs of this world, and so on. Is that a fair expectation from us, or from society rather, to say, internal auditors, we rely on you really, although you work for the organizations, to blow the whistle?
It's a very tough expectation for internal auditors. Is it a fair expectation? Yes, I think there has been globally over time, there has been whistleblowing, United States, South Africa as well. We know in South Africa we've had at least one or two auditors who have lost their lives as a result of the activities that they have taken. So they showed huge moral courage, those individuals. But it's also about the critical mass of showing that you're not prepared to bend to any threats and the way you deal with it. So it shows a conscious effort to deal with individuals in a collaborative way and try and change behavior.
Yeah, I mean, we do know, all of us, that corruption is prevalent both in the public and private sector. As people have said, it takes two to tango. You yourself, you were quoted in your statement that was issued as part of this conference that one of the greatest reporting statements in the world is the integrated report, and it started in this country.
That's
but
good.
You said it's the tip of the iceberg because there's a lot of stuff below.
Yes, well, the tip of the iceberg in the fact that the report presents what the company is doing. It presents the financial statements, but it's also there to show the positive and the negatives of the organization and how it's utilizing what in the integrated reporting terms is called the capitals, the 6 capitals. Now, it's how they utilize those capitals and how you report on those capitals that's important. That report should be telling you what's happening underneath the organization, whether it's acting ethically, whether it's using resources economically and effectively, and for the good of society. And it's in that space that we should be able to see exactly what's going on in an organization. It's also interesting that in the government space, they were a little bit ahead of the private sector because they've already got those mechanisms in place.
Now, finally, before I let you go, Mr. Nel, internal auditing really plays an important role from, as you said, ethical, moral, in terms of red flagging the stuff. But you said it's not regulated compared to external auditors. So for it to really have the relevant teeth, would you want it to see being regulated, or what would you want to see to happen for internal audit to play its role in the fight against corruption?
I think currently it's a membership body. We are discussing with IRBA. We all heard that it's going to become probably a comprehensive regulator for the accounting profession in the country as well as the auditing profession. So there are discussions going on with them at the moment to see how we might regulate within the country, within the framework. But it's the starting steps at the moment.
So, but regulation should be the way to go, you think?
I would believe that it's a way to ensure that internal auditors apply the standards in an effective way.
Thank you very much. That's Mr. Charles Nel, the Acting Chief Executive of the Institute of Internal Auditors of South Africa. Now,